Good afternoon. We'll jump right into the second session. This is a shorter session, and if we could have about 20-25 minutes of presentation and a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, that'd be great. We're thrilled to have two representatives of the NBA here with us, Garth Glissman and David Krichavsky. And I've had a little bit of a chance offline to watch the work they're doing with the NCAA and some of the youth development work, and just know how seriously they're taking it upon themselves to provide better opportunities, better information, better knowledge for young players. So I'll stop there. Dave, you going first, then Garth. And thanks for taking the time. Look forward to your insights both on policy and also what you're trying to do to better support players and their families. And we'll have some Q&A at the back end. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Arnie and Dr. Cartwright and members of the commission. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you this morning to share the latest on the NBA's impact on basketball development pathways and the future of our sport. I think our previous panelists are still in here, but Coach Bray, Dan, Carrie, Kevin, thank you for the terrific session and your partnership, and we certainly look forward to continued collaboration with the NCAA. My name is David Krichavsky. I serve as Senior Vice President and Head of Youth Basketball Development at the NBA, and I'm joined by my colleague Garth Glissman, who is our Associate Vice President of Basketball Operations. And on behalf of the NBA, Garth and I really appreciate the opportunity to engage with you in this fast-changing environment and talk about some of the things that the NBA is doing to grow the sport of basketball really at all levels. There are several things, and we have a few slides. There are several things that we want to speak with you today about, and then certainly look forward to your questions. We'll start with some of our NBA programs designed to grow and improve youth and grassroots basketball. We'll then talk about our elite talent development initiatives, both internationally and domestically. We'll talk about changes and growth that is underway at the NBA G League, including the new G League Professional Path program. We'll provide a brief update on the NBA's draft eligibility rule, which, as everyone knows, is, of course, collectively bargained with our Players Association. And then finally, Garth will talk about some of the enhancements we've made in recent months, working very closely with the NCAA to the pre-draft process, really providing the college basketball community with better information in advance of the NBA draft. To start, important to note that the NBA hasn't been involved in youth basketball for a number of years. Our Junior NBA program is the official youth basketball development program of the NBA, the WNBA, the G League. It attempts to teach the fundamental skills as well as the core values of our sport to young people at the grassroots level, and attempt to grow and build basketball participation on a global scale. Here in the U.S., we have programs for players at all levels of skill development and all ages. We have a Junior NBA instructional curriculum, which is available free to all coaches, players, and parents. It includes nearly 50 practice plans across 4 different levels of skill development. It includes more than 250 instructional videos with NBA players and WNBA players and coaches. And it's a resource that's very, very valuable for the grassroots community. We are also very proud to have partnered with USA Basketball to jointly develop the first ever set of youth basketball guidelines, which Dan referenced earlier. These guidelines provide structure to a grassroots environment that has historically been highly unstructured. They have a specific focus on player health and wellness, include a strong statement in favor of multi-sport participation. In fact, the NBA and USA Basketball are on the record saying that young players should not specialize in the sport of basketball until age 14 at the earliest. They also include common sense guidelines in terms of the maximum amount of basketball that kids should be playing to combat some of the overuse and burnout that we see really in all of youth sports, and basketball included. Also want to be sure to note that we are very focused on girls basketball participation. We recently launched Her Time to Play, which is a new joint initiative between the NBA and the WNBA to inspire the next generation of girls to participate in our sport, and importantly, to recruit more females to serve as coaches and role models and mentors for the young girls that play. We are all too conscious of the fact that across youth sports, only 23% of coaches are female, and so we are working hard to change those numbers in the sport of basketball. The Junior NBA is not just a domestic program. When Commissioner Adam Silver became commissioner in 2014, he really charged our staff with relaunching and growing the Junior NBA program, and we have done that over the past several years, such that this year we will reach nearly 52 million boys and girls in 75 different countries around the world with our program. And so those numbers are far-reaching, but something that we lacked prior to last year was anything that unified those 52 million kids across 75 countries, that brought them together in a meaningful way. And that is why we were really excited to launch last year the Junior NBA Global Championship, which is a first-of-its-kind youth basketball tournament for the top 13 and 14-year-old players from around the world that essentially serves as our sports version of the Little League World Series. Last year, we had 10,000 boys and girls that participated in the tournament at all levels, and 300 of them from 35 different countries won their local competitions or regional competitions and earned their way to compete in our global championship, which took place last August at the ESPN Wide World of Sports Complex in Orlando. This initiative, wanted to share, it's exciting to us on a number of levels, but what really gets us excited is the ability to use it and other programs to redefine and to elevate the entire youth basketball experience. And so we've designed this event to adhere to the highest standards in our sport, which means for us a number of things. It means, for one, a focus on coaching education, which of course we heard a little bit about before, but every coach that's a part of this tournament needs to be properly licensed and certified. For U.S. coaches, that means by USA Basketball. For international coaches, by FIBA or the respective national federations. It also means that the tournament adheres to our youth guidelines, which I mentioned earlier around player health and wellness. No player is ever asked to play more than 2 games in a given day, which, as many of you know, is not the norm in many youth tournaments. And it's also the case that as much as this tournament is a highly competitive on-court experience, as much an off-court experience. There's mandatory life skills education and also NBA Cares community service projects. Now I'm going to shift gears slightly and want to address some of the NBA's efforts to develop elite-level talent among high school-age players. So these are players that have the opportunity to play at the college and professional level. And it's important to note here that historically the NBA has been hands-off relatively as it relates to the development of top high school players, and instead we've relied on the high school basketball system, the club system, often referred to as AAU basketball or summer and travel basketball, as well as the collegiate environment to develop NBA caliber players. But as our commissioner has said many times in recent months and probably over the past couple of years, we do recognize the need to get more engaged in elite grassroots basketball, and we have taken some very intentional steps in that direction recently. Our first such steps were overseas, where in 2016 we launched our NBA Academy program. The NBA now has 7 international academies in operation, 1 each in Australia, India, Mexico, and Africa, and 3 NBA academies are currently in operation in China. These academies are residential facilities that employ a holistic approach to player development with focuses on education, leadership, life skills, character development, health and wellness. We expose these prospects to NBA-level coaching, NBA-type facilities, and also engage them in international competitions where they get to compete against some of the best in the world. In just 3 years, this initiative is already having impact. We have 15 NBA Academy graduates that are currently enrolled in playing basketball at NCAA Division I institutions or have committed to do so. We also have the first graduate of the NBA Academy program who was drafted into one of our leagues, Han Xu, who trained at the NBA Academy in Shandong, made her WNBA debut earlier this month as a member of the New York Liberty. You see her here in an exhibition game at the Barclays Center where she scored 19 points against some of her former teammates on the Chinese women's national team. Regarding our domestic elite development initiatives, I know this commission had an opportunity last October to hear from Jim Tooley and Sean Ford at USA Basketball, And I would say about 18 months to 2 years ago, when the NBA stepped back and started to study how we could have a more direct impact on domestic elite basketball development, we did a lot of research, a lot of studying, and ultimately we came back to the fact that one of our closest partners, USA Basketball, was already running a highly successful elite development initiative in their junior national team, and realized that coming together with other partners, that we could work with USA Basketball to enhance and elevate this program. And so that's what we've done. Dan mentioned it earlier. Last August, USA Basketball, the NBA, the National Basketball Players Association, and of course the NCAA came together to announce an enhanced junior national team program that is now identifying the top 20 to 25 players in each high school class, so freshmen through seniors, and providing those players with year-round development experience and opportunities. This program now includes more athletes, more touch points with these athletes, and earlier touch points with 6 annual training camps and competitions as part of the calendar, and a curriculum that's focused in 3 key areas, so on-court development, off-court life skills, and player health and wellness. As it relates to the on-court development, USA Basketball was already best in class, with the program being led by 8-time gold medal winning head coach Don Showalter. But the life skills part is the second pillar, and that's one of the new elements, and it includes in-person education sessions led by the NBA's Player Development Department, so that's the group that provides life skills education for NBA players, and it includes a number of topics that we cover with the players: positive decision-making, healthy relationships, mental wellness, leadership and character development, and then also the NCAA does a lot of work with these athletes around collegiate eligibility and recruiting. In addition to the in-person education that's part of the program, there's also e-learning that happens via distance learning modules, and the players are required to complete these modules in between the training camps. Third pillar of the program is player health and wellness. With the junior national team program, players now having access to world-class healthcare all around the calendar. Dr. Ed Lessert, who was the longtime athletic trainer for the Boston Celtics, was brought in to manage the player health program, and USA Basketball will soon be announcing the addition of a major leading academic medical institution that will provide resources to the players as well. There's also an extensive parent education program that's part of this, and so we provide resources and education and information to all the parents that are part of the junior national team program so that they can support their players on their athletic journey. And so I know I've thrown a lot of information regarding this program, but basically just to summarize what USA Basketball is now doing in connection with the NBA and the NCAA and other partners is identifying the top high school players early, often before they even enter their freshman year, working with them throughout their high school years, both on and off the court, giving them world-class medical care and resources, and also educating their parents and helping to provide that healthy support structure. Should also add, we're providing mentors for these players. So our office has hired Cherokee Parks, former Duke Blue Devil, longtime NBA pro, whose full-time job effectively is to serve as a mentor and a resource and to check in with these players and their families. And we also bring in a lot of outside speakers to speak with the group. At recent camp, they've heard from former NBA players like Jason Terry and Andre Miller and Quentin Richardson, and public servants. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Marty Dempsey, has spoken with the group. Arnie had a chance to speak with them at the Final Four, so we're really trying to expose them to a wide group of individuals. We'll now shift gears and talk about another subject that's been of discussion among the college basketball community, and that's the G League. As this group is aware, the G League is the NBA's official minor league. It now has 28 teams. All of those teams have direct one-to-one affiliation with NBA franchises. As relevant background for this discussion, 18-year-old players currently are eligible and have been for a number of years eligible to participate in the NBA G League. That is opposed to the NBA's minimum age requirement, which is of course 19. But what's new and what the G League announced last October was the addition of a new professional path opportunity, where beginning with the upcoming 2019-2020 G League season, the league will be offering G League select contracts to elite athletes who are eligible for the G League but not yet eligible for the NBA draft. And so to explain this program, I'll quickly touch on what this select contract program entails, why we developed the initiative, and how the program will be administered. So just to start with the what, G League select contracts pay eligible players $125,000 and also include opportunities for continued education, guaranteed funding for 4-year online degrees, life skills training is part of the program, and of course, year-round basketball development opportunities. The players that sign these contracts become students of the NBA game. They get exposed to the NBA quality coaching that's available at the G League, the NBA type facilities, the style of play, and they get to compete with and against the near NBA level talent that participates in the G League. We refer to the G League as the second best basketball league in the world. In effect, what we are creating is a financially attractive and developmentally rich training program for elite players until they are eligible to become eligible for the NBA draft. In terms of the why associated with the program, absent a change to the NBA's draft eligibility rule, which I'll talk about in a second, and of course has to be collectively bargained, the NBA does not have the authority to allow NBA players into the NBA. But we have heard loud and clear from the college basketball community, including from the Commission on College Basketball, chaired by Dr. Rice, that the NBA should enhance its professional offerings to create options, to create alternate pathways for elite players who are 18 years old and don't want to attend college. What we've heard from the college community, and certainly we believe it to be true, that being a full-time student on a college campus is an incredibly rich, incredibly rewarding, incredibly meaningful experience, but it's not for everyone, and that there should be options for those who want to pursue different paths. And so these G League select contracts are designed to fill that gap, providing a financial opportunity and a developmental springboard for these elite athletes that aspire to play in the NBA, but want to pursue a different path to get there. And finally, to address the how associated with the program in terms of how this select contract initiative will work and how the players will be identified. The honest answer to a number of the how programs is that with the program not tipping off until the upcoming G League season, many details remain fluid, and we don't yet have any announcements in terms of specific players or specific teams that will be part of the program. What I can say is that we have 2 staff members in our office in particular, Allison Feaster, who played basketball and graduated from Harvard University before embarking on a long professional career in the WNBA and overseas, and her colleague, Rod Strickland, who also had a highly distinguished NBA and professional career. And they have been out over the past several months in the grassroots community, talking with players, talking with families, and really just providing information as those families are trying to assess how to fulfill their NBA dreams. And so their approach has been one of education as opposed to recruiting. They very deliberately have not targeted any players that have committed to NCAA institutions. In fact, we have not heard, and I just surveyed my colleagues yesterday before leaving the office, we have not heard, our office hasn't, from any college coach that they feel like they're recruiting an athlete against the G League in any way. I will now shift to our draft eligibility rule. It is no secret that the NBA has been studying our draft eligibility rule in consultation with our NBA teams, with our Players Association, and with other key stakeholders in the basketball community. It's also, of course, clear that the college basketball community, including the Commission on College Basketball, has been very clear in calling for the elimination of what's commonly referred to as the one-and-done rule. When Adam Silver became commissioner in 2014, he argued for raising the NBA's age minimum to 20 as compared to the current 19-year-old age minimum. And many of our teams and general managers, in fact, would still be in favor of going to 20, given the additional scouting information that you receive on a player, seeing them compete at the NCAA level or elsewhere for 2 years after high school. But at the same time, we recognize that the world has changed and that it will continue to change, and especially in light of the Rice Commission's strong stance against the one and done rule, and that's something that Adam has said has influenced his views significantly. We are now seeing if we can work with our Players Association via the collective bargaining process to modify our draft eligibility rules to provide a pathway for 18-year-olds directly into the NBA. These conversations are ongoing. Commissioner Silver, in fact, was interviewed on ESPN last week and characterized the discussions as pretty intense, but he also noted that we do not negotiate with our Players Association in public, so certainly I will honor that as well. I am now going to transition to Garth, who will talk about, as I said, the enhancements we've made to our pre-draft process.
Thank you, David, and members of the commission. Beginning with the 2019 NBA draft, the NCAA adopted a new rule that requires college underclassmen to apply for feedback from the NBA Undergraduate Advisory Committee if they wish to preserve the right to return to college basketball after testing the waters of the NBA draft. Previously, the committee had been available to college players, but not required. At the NBA, we saw the new NCAA rule as an opportunity to take a fresh look at the committee and what we could do to improve, all with the goal of helping young men to make an informed decision at a pivotal time in their lives. That process of self-reflection led us to two important changes. First, we recognized that we could do a better job of educating the college basketball community, not only on the feedback provided by the committee, but the entire pre-draft process. Second, we improved the way that we communicate individual feedback to each player to make sure that the feedback is straightforward and easy to understand. Before we get into the new aspects of the committee, I should note that the committee consists of one senior basketball executive from all 30 NBA teams. Each team gets one vote. At the league office, we collect the information from the teams on a confidential basis, aggregate it, and provide it to the players. To ramp up our educational efforts this year, we created a new brochure on the committee and the pre-draft process in general. In advance of today's meeting, we provided copies of the brochure to the members of the commission. And copies of the brochure are also available to the media on the table outside today's meeting. As you will see, among other things, the new brochure provides key dates throughout the pre-draft process, an overview of all the sources of information, in addition to the committee, available to players to help them make an informed decision about whether to stay in school or enter the draft, and information to help each player contextualize the individual feedback that he receives. One of the key takeaways from the brochure is that a player's draft position is typically highly predictive of his NBA career. That means our teams do not miss much in their evaluation of players. It also means it is difficult for a player to beat the odds. In an effort to reach the entire college community, we sent the brochure to all NCAA Division I head basketball coaches, each player who applied for feedback from the committee, and athletic directors at each major conference school. And at the invitation of Dan Gavitt and Charnel Kemper from the NCAA, I traveled to the Final Four to present to a group of administrators and coaches, including Coach Bray. The second major change is the way that we communicate feedback to each individual applicant. In the past, we provided the feedback to the players and their coaches exclusively over the phone. Although well-intentioned and good for relationship building, that approach led to players receiving feedback that in hindsight was not as clear as we would have liked. To provide more clarity, we now provide each player with his feedback in writing. A sample feedback form is shown on this slide. It is also provided on page 6 of the brochure. As you see, for each player, we provide the player's most likely draft range and a breakdown of the votes that he received from each NBA team. And to keep the human touch, we supplement the written feedback with phone conversations with the players and their coaches upon request from either the player or his coach. This timeline slide provides helpful context because, as Dan Gavitt mentioned earlier, we are currently in the middle of this process. And this process effectively starts at the end of the college season. After a college basketball player plays his last game, he may submit his application to the Undergraduate Advisory Committee. The NBA's deadline to apply to the committee is April 11th. That enables us to provide feedback to all applicants prior to the deadline for a player to submit his name as an early entry candidate, which is on April 21st. This past week in Chicago, from May 12th to May 19th, we had both the G League Elite Camp and NBA Draft Combine in Chicago. And 1 week from today, on May 29th, it is the NCAA's withdrawal deadline for players who tested the waters to withdraw their name from the NBA draft if they wish to return to school. Between the end of the Combine and the NCAA's withdrawal deadline, all players who are still eligible for the draft will receive updated written feedback from the committee. This last round of feedback takes into account how a player performed at the Combine, G League Elite Camp, as well as workouts and interviews with teams. This year, we had a record high 218 college underclassmen apply for feedback from the NBA Undergraduate Advisory Committee. That number is up 24% from the previous record set last year and up 35% from the 3-year average. Among the 218 players who received initial feedback, 72, or roughly 33%, opted not to test the waters at all, meaning they did not submit their name to the NBA as an early entry candidate. And interestingly, the number of players testing the waters this year is actually down slightly from last year. Among the players who do test the waters, over the last 3 years, about 53% opt to return to school. Shortly after the NCAA's withdrawal deadline next week, we will provide the members of the commission with the final number of college underclassmen who opted to remain in the 2019 NBA draft. Before I conclude, I will quickly address one new aspect of the pre-draft process, and that is the G League Elite Camp. The best way to think about the G League Elite Camp is that it is an extension of the NBA Draft Combine. With the addition of two-way contracts per team prior to the 2017-18 season, and as David mentioned earlier, the increased importance of the G League, teams now have a legitimate need to scout more players. To be responsive to our teams, we added the G League Elite Camp, which enables them to scout an additional 40 draft-eligible prospects during the week of the Combine in Chicago. Like the Combine, the G League Elite Camp includes both seniors and underclassmen. Among the 40 attendees of the inaugural G League Elite Camp, 19 were college underclassmen, 20 were college seniors, and 1 player played internationally last season. Among the 40 attendees of the G League Elite Camp, 11 were selected to advance to the NBA Draft Combine, including 6 seniors and 5 underclassmen. And I would note that among the invitees, the initial invitees to the Draft Combine, only 5 college seniors were invited to participate. So the 6 who advanced by virtue of the G League Camp is proof that the G League Camp is actually providing more opportunities to current college seniors. So thanks again for having us today. It's a real honor to be with you as a former student athlete. I commend your work, and with our remaining time, David and I are happy to answer any of your questions.
Thanks, David and Garth. Really, really thoughtful and informative. A lot of information for us to absorb. We have time for a couple quick questions, so we'll go Walt, and if we have 1 or 2 others, then unfortunately we'll have to sort of cut after that, but we'll start with Walt. Thank you.
Yeah, very quickly. I'm fortunate enough to be a friend of Kathy Barron's, and I really appreciate her early work and now your work in helping to develop this, and I really appreciate Adam Silver's really honest communication about where the league stands and the division between owners and so forth. My question is this: in the current situation, a player who goes past the May 29th deadline and remains in the draft pool and then doesn't get drafted, does he have any options in the current way it's set up? I don't think he can return to college, and what happens there? I mean, I realize that we hope this will change in the future, and I commend you for everything you've done. But what happens in just this year, for instance?
So as Dan Gavitt mentioned previously, the Rice Commission has recommended a pathway for players who go all the way through the draft and are undrafted back to school. The problem is that under the current collective bargaining agreement, a player who goes through the draft and is undrafted is a rookie free agent, and pursuant to our rules, could be signed by an NBA team at any point. And that's problematic for the college community because, as Coach Bray noted earlier, coaches want roster certainty. And the last thing that they would want is a player who has a good start to the season, who went undrafted in June, all of a sudden gets a phone call back from one of the teams that was interested in him and wants to sign him. So at the present time, the NCAA has a withdrawal deadline of May 29th. The NBA actually has a later withdrawal date, and it's June 10th. And so that's for purposes of our rules. So hypothetically, and this does happen from time to time, a player could be beyond the NCAA's May 29th deadline, but they still have a little more than 10 days to withdraw from the NBA perspective. And if they did so, they could play internationally. They could play in our G League as someone who is not contractually beholden to an NCAA or to a G League team, or potentially they could go through the NCAA's reinstatement process.
Can you estimate now how many people that might be in that kind of?
That's a very small number each year. In most cases, I would say not a single player would fall into that category, and usually it takes unusual circumstances for a player to find himself in that situation.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll do Chris and then Jonathan. That'll be our final two questions. Thanks.
Thanks, man. The most important question would be where Chairman Duncan is going to go in the draft lottery this year. I was wondering that, but.
He had bad coaching in college. He's got
On a serious note, in terms of the G League compensation as it stands in the transition, because it's considerably lower. Did you say next year will be $125,000, depending if the player's in that contract, and now it's lower? What's the number?
Yeah, $125,000 is the contract for the select players. The typical G League contract is about $45,000 for the 5-month season, but that number gets a lot higher because players get bonuses for being called up to NBA teams, and so G League players, if they perform well, can see a couple of $100,000 in income over the course of the season.
And you said you have access to online education.
Absolutely, we have a partnership with Arizona State University that provides online education.
I've never heard of Arizona State.
Where is President? Thank you for your work and the work of your team. Yeah, so comprehensive life skills program. I mentioned the NBA's player development department earlier. That's the group that goes out to our G League players and does the life skills work, online education, the full gamut of resources available.
I was going to just commend you on that really significant package. I mean, you have folks coming out of universities and colleges. That's if you're making $50,000, $100,000 a year doing what you love, that's not a bad start in life. And I do compliment the other part with the education piece. I do want to know that Robert Morris has a great online program as well. It's not just Arizona State that does online education.
David, how many players do you anticipate will fall into that select contract?
A real small number. When we initially mapped out the program, we thought it could be 1 to 3 in a given year. I'll say we did get a late start. We announced this program last October. So if we end up with 0, if we end up with 1, if we end up with 2, I think that's fine. The key point here was making the alternative pathway available, and so we've done that.
Yeah, thank you both for being here. And Chris actually asked one of the questions I had, which had to do with continuing education credits. If you can just explain a bit more about how do you quantify that? How long do they have? And then the second question, with the potentially impending change in the age requirement, have you all thought about how that might change the current, sequence of programs you have for undergrads, for kids that may be considering not going to college?
Yeah, I'll answer the first question first, which is I'm not sure Garth and I, either of us, know the specifics, and so we can certainly get that information and follow up with you, or we'll make sure we get that to you. Regarding your second question, certainly a big part of our strategy with the junior national team program that I mentioned earlier is we know we need to get to young people earlier. And so now, as part of that initiative, we are bringing them into that program as early as the summer, leading into their freshman year of college. And that's when they start to get the full life skills package, the full educational resources, and that carries with them throughout their journeys in high school and then hopefully on college campus. campus. If they spend some time on a college campus, they get it as well, and then when they matriculate into the NBA. But there's no question that what we're doing at the youth and grassroots levels is to create at least a pathway should our draft eligibility rule change.
And you mentioned under the current program, you provide a lot of very direct feedback to college kids who may be considering entering the draft early. One of the concerns, when this came up in a previous session, the idea of lowering the age, one of the concerns is that you have a lot of high school players who may think that they're NBA worthy, so to speak, and may shortchange their high school education, thinking that, perhaps mistakenly, if I spend more time on my basketball skills, maybe, I have a better shot. And, the concern is, of course, making sure that there's enough feedback and enough information so that they don't walk down the path thinking that the less I spend in school, the better my chances are of getting to the pros.
Yeah, it's a risk and something we've spoken a lot about. And so some of the resources, information that we're providing as part of the undergraduate advisory process will have to be transferred down.
All right, final question, Michael.
Garth, I noticed in looking at your background that you were a tremendous scholar, athlete at Nebraska. You won the history prize as an undergraduate. You went on to law school. You've been a tremendous litigator. But you seem to have this sense of history and context, and that's sort of your interest. And so how do you think history will read us if we don't figure out how to build this interface between the NCAA and college athletes and the NBA around this tension around basketball? How do you think history will read us if we can't fix that?
It's a good question. I tend to agree that this is an important time, and the time to act is now. And what I can tell you is from the NBA's perspective is that we have really developed a strong relationship with our counterparts at the NCAA. I was sitting in the back row during the first presentation with Charnel Kemper, who's one of the NCAA's great lawyers. Dan Gavitt and his team have been great to work with. And so there's this sense of increased partnership across our organization and the NCAA that I think is going to lead to a lot of progress. And that was in motion prior to the Rice Commission, but I can tell you that coming out of the Rice Commission, that sense internally has only grown. And so the relationships are real, and the collaboration has been real, and that will continue in the future. And you are right, we need to act, and we need to act together and now.
Garth, David, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise. We'll take a quick 10-minute break. We'll start right at 11:50 for the next panel. 11:50, please. Thank you.